My mother walked into the attorney's conference room. She pointed at the chair beside me and said, "She does not belong at that table." 14 people heard her. The estate lawyer had not even opened my uncle's will yet. Rain slid down the windows of the 39th floor. Below us, the city of Minneapolis spread out in a cold gray blur. My mother stood there in a black coat with a little silver cross at her throat. She pretended grief had brought her all this way. It had not. Money had. My father hovered behind her with his hands folded over his stomach. My older sister stared at the carpet. Their attorney, shiny shoes, leather briefcase, smiled. Like this was only a negotiation, not the day a dead man had arranged to tell the truth. My mother looked at me again. "Mara," she said, softening her voice for the room, "you have already taken enough from this family." I did not stand. I did not argue. I placed both palms on the folder in front of me and looked straight at her. "No," I said. "Today we are going to talk about what you gave away." Her face twitched once. She did not understand yet. She would. "My name is Mara Ellison. I am 29 years old. When I was 13, my parents packed my clothes into 2 laundry baskets, set them on the curb outside our house in Dayton, Ohio, and told me my uncle could have me if he wanted me so badly. For 16 years, I thought that was the worst part of the story. Then, at my uncle Julian's will reading, I learned the truth. My parents had not just thrown me out, they had signed me away. The document was waiting inside a sealed evidence packet beside the will. Julian had kept it for more than a decade. He had kept the adoption order too. He had kept emails, loan papers, school records, hospital notes, and one handwritten letter addressed only to me. He had known my parents would come when he died. He had known they would call themselves family, and he had prepared an answer so clean that by the end of that afternoon, my mother was standing in a room full of strangers whispering, "That paper cannot be real," while her own lawyer walked out without looking back. I was born into a house where love had rules I never learned how to follow. My father, Martin Ellison, repaired vending machines for a regional service company. He was not cruel in a loud way. He was worse than that. He was useful to cruelty. He stood nearby. He watched. He made tired faces and said things like, "Don't upset your mother," as if my mother's anger were weather and I was careless for standing in the rain. My mother, Lorraine, worked as an office manager for a dentist in Kettering. She had the kind of voice people trusted over the phone, warm when she wanted something, sharp when she already had control. My sister Heather was 16 months older than me and lived in the center of every room. She had my mother's pale hair and my father's green eyes. Teachers called her charming. Neighbors called her a little star. My mother called her our bright one in front of people, and then looked at me like I was a smudge on the glass. I looked like my father's side of the family. Dark hair, brown eyes, quiet mouth. My grandmother had looked the same way, and my mother had never liked her either. The unfairness was not always dramatic. It was usually small enough that a child could be trained to doubt it. Heather got new shoes for school. I got her old ones after my mother scrubbed the soles and told me to be grateful because they were perfectly fine. Heather had framed photos from dance recitals in the hallway. I had one school picture in a drawer because, according to my mother, the photographer had caught me making that gloomy face. Heather had a college fund. I found the statement by accident when I was 12, tucked behind a stack of utility bills. My name was not on anything. When I asked, my mother did not even bother to lie. "Heather has plans," she said. "You always land on your feet." That sentence followed me for years. You always land on your feet. It sounds like praise until you realize it means no one plans to catch you. The fight that ended my childhood started with a letter from a school I was not supposed to reach. In 8th grade, my science teacher nominated me for the Great Lakes Young Inventors Institute, a 6-week residential program outside Ann Arbor. It was for students who had won regional awards in math, robotics, or environmental science. I had built a cheap water filtration prototype for the county fair using activated charcoal, gravel, and a pump from an old aquarium. It won first place. The institute accepted 60 students from 5 states. Tuition, housing, meals, lab fees, all covered by scholarship. The award letter came in a thick envelope with my name printed correctly. For about 20 minutes, I believed the world had opened a door for me. Then Heather came home crying because her choir director had recommended a summer vocal intensive in New York. No scholarship, 4 weeks, $6,400, not including travel. That night, my mother announced her decision while pouring spaghetti sauce from a jar. "Mara, you are going to decline that science camp." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. "What?" "Don't act confused. We cannot have two girls running off to summer programs. Heather's is more important for college, yours was free, so it is not like we are losing money." "It is free because I earned it," I said. My father looked at his plate. Heather sniffed and said, "I didn't ask them to pick me." My mother set the jar down hard enough that sauce jumped onto the counter. "This family makes decisions together." "No," I said before fear could stop me. "You made a decision for me, I am not declining." The kitchen went so quiet I heard the wall clock tick. My mother turned slowly. She was still holding the spoon. A red drop fell from it onto the floor. "You think you can tell me no?" My voice shook, but I kept going. "I think you cannot take a scholarship that belongs to me and turn it into Heather's trip." Heather gasped like I had slapped her. My mother stepped closer. "After everything we have done for you." I almost laughed, but it would have come out as a sob. "What have you done for me that you did not do twice for her?" That was the sentence she never forgave. 2 days later, I came home from the public library with 3 books in my backpack and found my clothes in laundry baskets beside the curb. Not on the porch, not by the door, on the curb where trash went. My mother was sitting on the front steps with her arms crossed. "Your Uncle Julian is coming," she said. "He thinks he knows so much about raising children, he can raise you." I looked past her through the open front door. My father stood in the living room, one hand on the back of the sofa. He did not come outside. "Where am I supposed to sleep tonight?" I asked. "Ask Julian. He lives in Minnesota." "Then I hope he left early." Heather watched from the upstairs window. When I looked up, the curtain moved and she disappeared. My mother went inside after 10 minutes. She locked the door. I sat on the curb beside 2 baskets of clothes while the sun went down and mosquitoes started biting my ankles. At some point, a neighbor slowed her car and looked at me. I lowered my head so she would keep driving. Julian arrived after midnight. He was my father's older half-brother, though I had only seen him a handful of times. He lived in Minnesota and owned a warehouse management company called North Star Commercial Logistics. My mother called him arrogant. My father called him lucky. I knew him as the uncle who sent birthday cards with $10 bills, and once told me my science fair project was the most practical thing in the gym. His old blue Subaru pulled up to the curb. He got out wearing jeans, a wrinkled button-down shirt, and the kind of expression adults get when they are trying not to scare a child by showing all their anger at once. He did not ask why I was outside. He did not ask what I had done. He picked up one basket, then the other, put them in his trunk, and came back for me. "Mara," he said, crouching so we were eye level, "you are coming home with me." "For how long?" His jaw tightened. "For as long as you need a home." I cried then. Not loudly. I had learned not to make noise when I was hurt. I just folded forward and he wrapped his arms around me while the porch light of my parents' house stayed off. I did not know that before he drove me away, he had spent nearly an hour inside that house with my parents and a notary my mother had called from her church. I did not know my parents had signed a guardianship surrender saying they were unable and unwilling to continue parental responsibilities for their minor daughter. I did not know my father had signed first. I did not know my mother had signed after him, pressing so hard the pen tore the paper. All I knew was that I fell asleep in the passenger seat somewhere north of Toledo, with my uncle's jacket over my knees and a paper cup of gas station hot chocolate cooling in my hands. Julian's townhouse in St. Paul was narrow, old, and full of books. My bedroom was a small room at the back with yellow walls and a slanted ceiling. The bed had a quilt that smelled like cedar. On the desk he had placed a new notebook, a pack of mechanical pencils, and a note. "No one gets to decide your future without you." I kept that note taped inside my closet for years. Julian was not soft in the way people imagine rescuers are soft. He believed in alarm clocks, homework, dental appointments, and doing the hard thing before the easy thing. But he never made me earn food, warmth, or safety. He never used shelter as a weapon. When I apologized for taking up space, he said, "This house is not doing me any good empty." When I flinched because I broke a glass, he swept it up and said, "Glass breaks. People matter." When the Young Inventors Institute called to confirm whether I would attend, he put the phone on speaker and let me answer for myself. "Yes," I said, my voice tiny but real, "I will be there." That summer changed everything. I spent 6 weeks in a lab with kids who argued about bridge design and battery efficiency instead of who deserved a bigger bedroom. I built a solar-powered irrigation sensor with 2 girls from Wisconsin and a boy from Illinois. I called Julian every Sunday night, and he listened like my small victories were company news. By the time I returned to St. Paul, I understood something I had never been allowed to understand in Dayton. I was not difficult to love. I was just living with people who had decided not to try. The next 5 years were not perfect. Healing is not a straight line. I had nightmares about the curb. I hoarded snacks in drawers. I panicked if Julian was late coming home because some childish part of me believed everyone eventually left, but he stayed. He came to parent-teacher conferences in work boots. He learned how to braid my hair badly for a robotics team banquet because I asked him once and he took it seriously. He sat through my high school graduation with a camera in one hand and a tissue in the other. I graduated first in my class from Central High. I earned a full scholarship to the University of Minnesota to study operations and supply chain management. Julian gave me a job in the filing room at North Star the summer before college, then rotated me through dispatch, tenant relations, lease records, maintenance budgeting, and property analysis. He owned 7 light industrial properties when I moved in with him. By the time I finished college, he owned 10. North Star was not glamorous. It was loading docks, roof repairs, snow removal contracts, insurance renewals, forklift damage, and tenants who paid late because their customers paid late. I loved it anyway. It was a business built on real things. Doors that opened, floors that held weight, contracts that meant what they said. After college, I worked for a regional audit firm in downtown Minneapolis. I earned my CPA license at 24. At 25, Julian asked me to come back to North Star as Director of Finance. At 27, I became Chief Operating Officer. The year I turned 28, our portfolio passed $31 million in value. Julian sent me flowers at the office with a card that said, "I knew the girl with the water filter would build something bigger." I still have the card. My parents contacted us only when they wanted something. The first time was when I was 15. My father called Julian and asked for $9,000 because the roof in Dayton needed replacing. Julian put the call on speaker only after asking my permission. "Has Lorraine asked about Mara?" he said. My father cleared his throat. "This is not about that." "Then the answer is no." The second time was when Heather got engaged at 22. A cream envelope arrived with my name written in my mother's handwriting. Inside was a wedding invitation and a registry card. No note, no apology, not even a sentence pretending they had missed me. I threw it away. The third time was after a business magazine ran a short profile of North Star's expansion into cold storage facilities. My mother sent an email with the subject line "Family." "Mara, I saw your picture online. You look well. It would be nice to reconnect now that everyone has had time to grow. Your father and I are getting older. Life is too short for bitterness." I deleted it. By then, I had stopped calling what I felt bitterness. Bitterness still ties you to the people who hurt you. What I felt was distance. Clean, useful distance. Julian was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in October of 2024. He told me in the office after everyone else had gone home. There was a maintenance report open between us. I remember staring at a line item about a cracked dock plate because my mind refused to move toward the words he had just said. "Stage 4, he said. The doctor was direct. I asked him to be. "How long?" 6 months if I am lucky, less if I am not. I gripped the edge of the table. "We will get another opinion. Already scheduled. We will get 3. He smiled sadly. That is my Mara, turning grief into a project plan. He lived 7 months. During that time he kept working when he could, rested when he had to, and met with his estate lawyer more often than I understood. Her name was Nina Caldwell, senior partner at Caldwell, Price & Voss. She had represented North Star for years. I trusted her because Julian trusted her, and because she had the calmest eyes I had ever seen in a lawyer. Whenever I asked Julian what he was arranging, he said, "Loose ends." What loose ends? The kind that knot themselves if you ignore them. I thought he meant taxes, property transfers, succession planning, charitable commitments. He meant my parents. Julian died on May 2, 2025 at a hospice facility near Lake Como. I was sitting beside him, reading aloud from a book about early American railroads, because he liked practical history and hated what he called soft music for dying people. His hand went slack in mine just after sunrise. For 3 days, I moved through the world like someone underwater. Employees came by the office with casseroles and cards. Tenants sent flowers. The local youth science center lowered its flag because Julian had funded their mobile lab for 8 years. My parents did not call about the memorial. They called about the will. The number appeared on my phone 9 days after he died. Dayton area code. I was in Julian's office, sorting through files I was not ready to touch. "Mara," my mother said when I answered. I closed my eyes. "Lorraine." The silence was immediate. She hated when I used her name. "I heard about Julian." "From whom?" "That is not important. I am very sorry." She paused just long enough to make room for me to comfort her. I did not. "The service was last week," I said. "Yes, well, no one informed us." "You did not ask." Her breathing sharpened. "Your father has lost his brother. I do not think this is the time for your attitude. What do you want?" There it was, the question she had trained me never to ask. She recovered quickly. "We have retained counsel. There are questions about Julian's estate plan. Your father is his closest living blood relative. Julian had an attorney. So do we. His name is Grant Bellamy. He says family members have rights, especially when an elderly man may have been influenced by someone who controlled access to him." I looked at Julian's empty chair. "Are you accusing me of something?" "I am saying grief makes people do things. Money makes them do worse things." For 1 second, the old 13-year-old inside me wanted to explain. I wanted to say I had been the one changing dressings, tracking medication, sleeping in vinyl hospital chairs, calling contractors between oncology appointments, holding Julian's hand when pain made him curse under his breath. Then I remembered who I was talking to. "Have your attorney contact Nina Caldwell," I said. "Mara, do not be dramatic." "Goodbye, Lorraine." I hung up while she was still speaking. Nina called me the next morning. Her voice was professional, but I heard the anger underneath. "Grant Bellamy has filed a notice of intent to contest the will on behalf of Martin and Lorraine Ellison," she said. "They are alleging undue influence, financial manipulation, and improper isolation of the decedent." I sat down before my knees could decide for me. Improper isolation? "They are claiming you cut Julian off from his natural family and positioned yourself to inherit. He had barely spoken to Martin in years before I moved here." "I know. Do they know?" "They know enough to hope litigation will scare you." Nina explained their strategy. They did not need to win. If they could create a credible challenge, the estate could be delayed for a year or longer. North Star's financing, property transfers, and management authority could be tangled in court. Legal fees could climb. Tenants could get nervous. Banks could demand additional guarantees. "They are asking for 40%, she said. I let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. "Of a company they never helped build." "Correct. And if I pay them, they will sign a release. That is what Bellamy wants. A nuisance settlement big enough to make them go away." "How big?" "Their opening number is $5 million. For a moment, the office tilted. $5 million. For the people who had left me on a curb, Nina let the silence sit. "There is something else," she said. "What?" Julian expected this. "I need you to come in." Her office was on South 6th Street, high above the Skyway, with glass walls and quiet carpet. I arrived at 9 the next morning, carrying nothing but my purse and a grief so heavy it felt physical. Nina placed a brown archival folder on the table. "Before we discuss options, you need to see this." Inside was a document dated August 3, 2009. Voluntary transfer of custody and guardianship. My name was in the first paragraph. Mara Jane Ellison, minor child. My parents' names followed. Martin Paul Ellison and Lorraine May Ellison, biological parents. The language was clinical. The parents voluntarily relinquish physical custody and all parental decision-making authority. The parents acknowledge that Julian Robert Ellison shall assume full responsibility for the minor child's residence, education, medical decisions, and general welfare. The parents waive any claim for financial support from the guardian and agree that the guardian shall have standing to pursue permanent adoption if deemed in the child's best interest. At the bottom were signatures. My father's was slanted and weak. My mother's was sharp and hard. There was Julian's signature beneath theirs. There was a notary stamp from Montgomery County. I could not speak. Nina slid a second document across the table. "This one is from 2011, petition for adoption. Final decree granted November 18, 2011, Ramsey County District Court. Julian had adopted me when I was 15. No one had told me. Not because it was hidden from me out of shame. Nina explained that Julian had planned to tell me when I turned 18, then hesitated because I was applying to colleges and still fragile around abandonment. Later, he thought I already understood the practical truth and did not want a legal revelation to reopen the wound. He had written that in a memo to her. I read the adoption decree 3 times. So legally, I said, my voice thin, Martin and Lorraine stopped being my parents. They transferred custody in 2009. Julian became your legal father in 2011. And Martin is Julian's half-brother. That gives him no automatic right to inherit when there is a valid will. Their claim depends on undermining your relationship with Julian. These documents do the opposite. Nina folded her hands. Julian left instructions. If they made no claim, we would handle the estate quietly. If they challenged the will, he wanted the will reading to proceed with all interested parties present. He wanted the guardianship and adoption records entered into the meeting record. He also wanted certain letters and business documents available. He knew they would humiliate themselves. He knew they would try to humiliate you. That distinction mattered. Nina gave me 2 choices. We could send Bellamy the documents privately, offer a small settlement to avoid delay, and require confidentiality. Or we could let my parents attend the will reading they had demanded, allow them to make their claim in front of witnesses, and then put the truth into the record exactly as Julian had instructed. Public is harder, Nina said. Even if the law is on your side, it will be emotionally ugly. Private means they get money. Likely, yes. How much? I could probably make them accept $750,000, maybe less after they see the documents. I stared at the adoption decree. $750,000 was more than every scholarship Julian had ever funded for young inventors. More than the new loading dock at our North Loop property. More than the grant he had promised the Youth Science Center before he died. I thought about my mother telling strangers I had taken enough from the family. I thought about the curb. I thought about Julian driving through the night. No settlement, I said. Nina studied me. Are you certain? They wanted a room. Give them a room. The will reading was scheduled for Friday, May 23, 2025 at 2 in the afternoon. The week before it felt unreal. I kept going to work because North Star still needed decisions. A tenant in Building 4 had a plumbing failure. A lender needed updated insurance certificates. The payroll system locked 2 employees out. Ordinary problems do not pause for grief. That was one of the strange mercies of work. It forced my attention into rooms where my mother could not follow. A leaking pipe did not care that I had been abandoned. A bank covenant did not care that I had just buried the man who raised me. People needed answers, and answering them reminded me that I was not only a daughter in mourning, I was also the person Julian had trained to keep promises. On Monday morning, I walked the Bloomington property with our facilities director Marcus. He was in his 60s, blunt, loyal, and incapable of pretending not to notice when someone was hurting. You do not have to be here, he said, as we stood beside a loading bay with a cracked seal. Yes, I do. No, he said. You want to be here because the office makes sense and grief does not. I looked at him. He shrugged. Julian used to do the same thing. His brother would call asking for money, and Julian would come inspect gutters. That was the first time I realized how long Martin had been a wound in Julian's life. I had always thought my arrival created the final break between the brothers. Marcus told me the break had started years earlier, with unpaid loans, broken promises, and my father's habit of turning every favor into an obligation for someone else. Julian did not cut him off because of you, Marcus said. He was already almost there. You just showed him what Martin was willing to sacrifice. My closest friend, Priya Raman, helped me prepare in the evenings. She was North Star's general counsel and the person who had sat with me in hospital cafeterias when Julian was asleep. She knew almost everything. I found the old loan agreement, she said one night, dropping a scanned document into our shared folder. Martin borrowed $65,000 from Julian in 2001. I thought it was 40. It became 65 after Julian covered their second mortgage arrears. Martin signed a repayment schedule, paid back nothing. There were emails too. Julian had saved everything. Messages from my father asking for money. Messages from my mother accusing Julian of turning me against them after she had gone 7 years without contacting me. A note from a school counselor documenting that I arrived in Minnesota with no immunization records because my mother refused to mail them. Priya also pulled North Star's performance reports. Under my operations leadership, tenant retention had improved, cash reserves had doubled, and the company had acquired 3 additional properties without taking on reckless debt. If they argue you exploited him, Priya said, we show you protected what he built. She built a binder so organized it looked like a weapon. The first tab held the guardianship and adoption records. The second held Julian's medical evaluations. The third held company performance reports from before and after I joined leadership. The fourth held communication history with my parents, including the uncomfortable fact that they had never once asked Julian for my report cards, medical updates, graduation dates, or college address. Priya placed one email on top because she said it mattered emotionally, even if it mattered less legally. It was from Julian to my father in 2014 after Martin had asked for money again. Martin, you have not asked how Mara is in 5 years. She graduates next month. She has earned honors you would know about if you had ever shown interest. I will not send money to a man who discarded a child and calls only when the roof leaks. I had to walk away from the table after reading it, not because it hurt, because someone had defended me when I was not even in the room, and I was still learning how to accept that kind of love. On Thursday night, I met with my therapist, Dr. Samira Holt. She had been helping me untangle my childhood since I was 22. What do you want out of tomorrow? She asked. I want them to lose. She waited. I rubbed my forehead. I know that sounds ugly. It sounds honest. I want them to feel one fraction of the shame they put on me. And after they feel it? That question stopped me. I looked at the plant on her windowsill. Its leaves were glossy and green, carefully turned toward the light. After that, I want to go home, I said. I want to run the company. I want to fund Julian's scholarships. I want to stop proving I deserved to be kept. Dr. Holt nodded. Then tomorrow is not revenge. It is a boundary with witnesses. I slept 3 hours that night. The next afternoon, I arrived at Caldwell, Price & Voss early. I wore a charcoal suit Julian had once said made me look like a banker who knows where the bodies are buried. I almost smiled when I buttoned the jacket. Nina's conference room faced the river. The table could seat 18. Along one wall, extra chairs had been arranged for attendees who were not beneficiaries or estate representatives. That detail mattered. Julian had invited witnesses, the executive director of the Youth Science Center, 2 senior managers from North Star, our outside auditor, a representative from the Community College Foundation. Priya sat near me with a yellow legal pad and a face that warned anyone sensible not to test her. At 2:04, the elevator doors opened. My mother came in first, wearing black gloves though it was May. My father followed in a navy suit too tight across the shoulders. Heather came behind them, her hair pulled into a smooth knot, eyes already wet, in a way that might have been emotion or strategy. Grant Bellamy walked last, tall and silver-haired, carrying himself like the room should be grateful he had entered. Lorraine's gaze found me immediately. Mara, she said. Before this begins, I think we should speak privately. No, her eyebrows rose. Excuse me? No, I repeated. Anything relevant can be said with counsel present. Bellamy smiled. Ms. Ellison, surely a brief family conversation would be healthier than this adversarial posture. Nina looked up from her papers. Mr. Bellamy, your clients filed a notice contesting the will. The posture is one they selected. His smile thinned. Nina gestured to the chairs along the wall. Mr. and Mrs. Ellison, Ms. Carver, Mr. Bellamy, you may sit there. My mother looked at the main table. We are family. You are attending parties, Nina said. Beneficiaries and estate representatives are seated at the table. It was a small thing, being asked to sit against the wall. For my mother, it was a public demotion. My father understood it before she did. I saw his shoulders sink as he looked from the Polish table to the side chairs. He had spent his life letting my mother walk first into every room, then pretending surprise when the room pushed back. Heather paused behind him, clutching a small black purse with both hands. For a second, her eyes met mine, and I saw the memory there, the curb, the window, the fact that she had been old enough to know. Then my mother touched her elbow, and Heather looked away. She did not take it well. On her way to the side chairs, she stopped beside the Youth Science Center director, a gentleman named Owen Pierce. Julian loved children, she said loudly. It is tragic that certain people use that softness against him. Owen's expression cooled. Julian also valued precision, he said. I expect today will provide that. My mother blinked. Heather whispered, "Mom, please sit down." But Lorraine had already turned toward me. "A child does not get removed from a home for no reason," she said, her voice carrying. "People should remember that before making judgments." The room changed. Not loudly, no one gasped, no one shouted. But every person there understood that my mother had just accused a 13-year-old child in order to protect her claim to money. I felt Priya's hand touch my wrist under the table. I did not respond. Nina checked the time. "It is 2:10. We will begin." She opened the sealed envelope with a letter opener, removed the will, and read the formal opening. Julian Robert Ellison, born January 9, 1958, deceased May 2, 2025. The document had been executed on December 12, 2024, after medical and cognitive evaluations confirmed he had full capacity. Bellamy shifted in his chair. That was their first problem. Nina read the asset summary. Northstar Commercial Logistics held 13 industrial and warehouse properties across Minnesota and western Wisconsin, appraised at $27.8 million. Investment accounts totaled $5.6 million. Cash and short-term reserves added $2.1 million. Personal property, vehicles, and remaining assets brought the estate's gross value to just over $36 million before taxes and charitable commitments. Heather inhaled sharply. My mother did not move, but I saw her fingers tighten around her purse. Then Nina turned to the exclusions. Article 4, she read, regarding my half-brother, Martin Paul Ellison. My father's head lifted. "I make no gift to Martin Paul Ellison. This is intentional. It is not an omission." His face drained. Nina continued. "In 2001, Martin borrowed $65,000 from me under a written repayment agreement. He never made a payment. In the years that followed, he contacted me for money repeatedly, but made no effort to repair the personal breach his conduct created." My father stared at the table as if the wood might open and let him hide. More importantly, on August 3, 2009, Martin and Lorraine Ellison voluntarily transferred custody and guardianship of their minor daughter Mara Jane Ellison to me. They did so after removing her from their home and refusing to provide further care. My mother's head snapped up. "That is not true." Nina did not pause. "The signed and notarized guardianship transfer is preserved with my estate documents. I request that it be made available if Martin, Lorraine, or any person acting through them attempts to claim family standing through Mara." "Stop reading," my mother said. Nina looked over her glasses. "Mrs. Ellison, you will not interrupt again." "That paper was temporary." "It was not," Nina said, "and you will have an opportunity to review the certified copy after the reading." Bellamy leaned toward my mother and whispered, "Let her finish." For the first time since entering the room, Lorraine looked uncertain. Nina turned the page. Article 5, Adoption and Legal Relationship. My pulse sounded in my ears, though I already knew what was coming. On November 18, 2011, I adopted Mara Jane Ellison by final decree of the Ramsey County District Court. From that date forward, she has been my daughter-in-law and in truth. My father made a small noise. Heather whispered, "Adopted?" My mother stood. The chair scraped the floor. "No, we never agreed to that." Nina's voice stayed even. "Your consent was not required after the guardianship transfer and waiver of parental rights you signed in 2009. I did not waive my rights." Nina removed a document from the evidence packet and placed it on the table. "This is the certified copy. Your signature appears on page 4. My mother stared at the paper but did not step closer. "Mara," she said, suddenly using a wounded voice, "you know we never meant it like that." I looked at her for the first time that afternoon. "You put my clothes on the curb." Her mouth tightened. "You were impossible." There it was, the truth under the performance. I felt something inside me settle. "I was 13, I said. You were tearing the family apart." "No." I said no to giving Heather my scholarship. Heather flinched. "I did not know they would do that," Heather whispered. My mother spun toward her. "Do not start." Heather's face crumpled, but she kept going, barely audible. "I knew they were angry. I did not know about papers." "Enough," my mother snapped. For the first time, I heard something in Heather's voice that was not defense. It was fear, old and familiar. I had spent years thinking she had lived free of our mother's control because she was the favorite. In that moment, I understood something more complicated. Favoritism was still a leash. Hers had just been lined with velvet. It did not excuse her, but it explained why her hands were shaking. My father closed his eyes. The room was silent enough that I heard rain hit the glass. "You told Uncle Julian I was his problem," I said. "Then you signed a document so you would never have to be responsible for me again. You do not get to call that temporary because the consequences arrived with witnesses." My mother's lips parted. For once, she had no immediate answer. Nina resumed. Article 6, Sole Beneficiary. Bellamy sat perfectly still. "I leave the residue of my estate, including all ownership interests, real property, financial accounts, personal property, and business succession rights, to my daughter, Mara Jane Ellison." Daughter. Even knowing it was coming, the word hit me like a hand over my heart. Nina continued reading Julian's words. "Mara came to me as a child carrying shame that did not belong to her. She grew into a woman of discipline, intelligence, restraint, and uncommon integrity. She has worked in my company, strengthened it, and protected the people whose livelihoods depend on it. I trust her completely." My eyes burned. I pressed my fingers together under the table and forced myself to breathe. "I make this gift not to compensate her for what she endured, because no estate can repay a stolen childhood. I make it because she is my child, because she earned my confidence, and because she will do more good with these resources than anyone I know." My mother sat down slowly. The fight had not left her. It had changed shape. "This is manipulation," she said, but quietly now. He was sick. Bellamy cleared his throat. "We reserve all rights to challenge testamentary capacity and undue influence." Nina turned another page. "Then we should address your role, Mr. Bellamy." His confident expression faltered. Nina slid a printed email thread across the table. "Julian consulted you in 2020 regarding succession planning, did he not?" Bellamy's jaw tightened. "Briefly. He terminated that consultation after you advised him to include Martin in the estate plan, despite your knowledge of the unpaid loan and the guardianship history." "That characterization is incomplete," Nina read from the email. "Grant, I am ending this consultation because your recommendation protects Martin from the consequences of his conduct and ignores my legal relationship with Mara. I will find counsel who respects my wishes." Bellamy's face went a dull red. Nina looked at my parents. "Your attorney previously advised Julian on matters related to this estate. He possessed confidential information about Julian's intentions and about the documents he is now pretending to discover for the first time." My mother turned on Bellamy. "You said we had a strong case." He adjusted his cuff. "I said there were arguments available. You said she would settle." The room heard that too. Bellamy closed his briefcase. "I need to review the documents before advising further." Nina's voice was flat. "That would have been wise before filing." He stood. "We will be in contact." "Grant," my mother snapped. He did not look at her. He walked out of the conference room and let the door close softly behind him. My parents had arrived with a lawyer. Now they had a chair against the wall and a certified copy of the papers they once thought no one would show me. Nina waited until the door was fully closed. "We will continue." The next article created 3 charitable funds. $800,000 to the Twin Cities Youth Science Center for mobile STEM labs in underserved school districts. $500,000 to a legal aid clinic for minors in guardianship and foster placement disputes. $400,000 to a community college scholarship for students who had been displaced from their homes before adulthood. Owen Pierce bowed his head. The representative from the legal aid clinic wiped her eyes. Nina read Julian's instruction that I continue his annual giving, at my own discretion and without pressure from any person who confuses blood with entitlement. I almost laughed through my tears because that sounded exactly like him. Then Nina opened a smaller envelope. Julian left a personal letter for Mara. He authorized me to read part of it aloud if she wished. She looked at me. I nodded. Nina unfolded the paper. I recognized Julian's handwriting immediately, square and slightly crowded, as if his thoughts had always moved faster than his pen. "Mara," she read, "if this letter is being read in a room with Martin and Lorraine present, then they did what I expected. I am sorry. I wanted to be wrong about them for your sake. I was not." My mother made a sound like a breath catching on glass. "You once asked me whether people can choose to stop being family. The answer is yes. Your parents made that choice when they abandoned you. I made a different choice when I came to get you. You made the bravest choice of all when you kept living as if the future might still be kind." I covered my mouth. Do not let them turn your compassion against you. You can forgive a debt of love without reopening the account. You can wish people peace from a locked door. You can be grateful for your own survival without offering your life back to the people who made survival necessary. Nina paused to steady her voice. Everything I built is yours now. Not because you were discarded, because you are capable. Not because I rescued you, because you rose. I love you with the full pride of a father. Build something useful, build something honest. Then go home and sleep without their voices in your head. By the end, I was crying openly. I was not embarrassed. The people in that room had come to witness a legal event. They had witnessed a father speaking after death to make sure his daughter did not stand alone. My mother stood again, but this time the performance was different. Mara, she said trembling, I made mistakes. I can admit that. I was under pressure. Your father was barely working. Heather had needs. You were always so strong, and I thought Julian could offer you more. You left me outside for hours. I was overwhelmed. You locked the door. Her eyes flashed. You always focus on the worst part. No, I said. I focus on the honest part. She swallowed. We are still your parents. Legally, no. In God's eyes. Do not bring God into a document you signed in front of a notary. Priya looked down at her notes, but I saw the corner of her mouth move. My mother tried again. We can repair this. We can be a family. We can sit down and divide things in a way that respects everyone. There it was. Repair meant money. Family meant leverage. I stood. Lorraine, I forgave you years ago because I did not want to carry you inside me anymore. But forgiveness is not access. It is not a payment plan. It is not an invitation. You are not part of my life, and you will not be part of Julian's estate. My father finally spoke. Mara, please. I looked at him. His hair was thinner now. His shoulders had rounded. He looked older than Julian had looked before the illness took weight from him. You watched, I said. He flinched. That is what I remember about you. You watched. He had no answer. Heather was crying silently. I could not tell whether she was crying for me, for herself, or for the money evaporating in front of her. Nina finished the reading at 3:38 p.m. The will named me executor and sole beneficiary after charitable distributions. It authorized immediate transfer of business control. It included a no-contest provision that would disqualify any named recipient who challenged the document, though my parents had been left nothing to lose. But they had lost anyway. They had lost the story. Nina also read a final administrative instruction that Julian had written in plain language after the legal clauses. He requested that North Star's employees receive a retention bonus if they stayed through the transition year. He directed that no tenant be displaced for redevelopment without a relocation plan. He asked that the company continue offering paid internships to students who did not have family networks to open doors for them. Those details steadied me. My mother had treated the estate as a pile of money. Julian had treated it as a web of responsibilities. Buildings, tenants, employees, students, vendors, neighborhoods. He had understood that inheritance was not only what someone receives, it is what someone agrees to carry. When Nina read those instructions, Marcus looked down and wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. That sounds like him, he muttered. It did. When Nina closed the folder, the room stayed quiet. Then Owen Pierce stood and said, Julian knew exactly what he was doing. The auditor nodded. Priya reached for my hand under the table. My mother looked smaller than when she had entered. Not sorry, not yet, just smaller. Public truth had reduced her to human size. As people began leaving, she approached me one last time. Mara, I am your mother. I picked up Julian's letter and placed it inside my folder. No, I said. You are the woman who signed the paper. She recoiled as if I had slapped her. Then she walked out, my father following, Heather trailing behind them like a shadow that had not decided where it belonged. I stayed in the conference room after everyone else left. The rain had stopped. The river below reflected a pale strip of late afternoon light. Priya sat beside me without speaking. After a while I said, I thought it would feel bigger. What? Winning. She leaned back in her chair. Maybe because it was never about winning. I looked at the empty doorway where my mother had disappeared. Then what was it about? Ending the argument. That was exactly what it felt like. Not joy, not revenge, an ending. 3 weeks later, Nina filed a professional conduct complaint against Grant Bellamy. She did not ask my permission because she did not need it. Lawyers have obligations when they discover another lawyer has used confidential knowledge from a former client in a related matter. The complaint cited conflict of interest, failure to disclose prior consultation, and filing claims without a reasonable factual basis. Bellamy had known about Julian's estate intentions. He had known there were documents damaging to my parents' position. He had taken their money anyway and told them pressure might work. In August, the Minnesota Lawyers' Professional Responsibility Board suspended him for 9 months. He was fined, ordered to complete ethics training, and lost 2 major corporate clients before the year ended. My mother left a voicemail the day the suspension became public. "Your little lawyer destroyed Grant," she said. "I hope you are proud." I deleted it. Grant Bellamy destroyed Grant Bellamy. My mother had simply paid to stand close enough to the blast to feel it. The estate itself settled faster than anyone expected. Bellamy's departure left my parents scrambling for another attorney, and once the new lawyer reviewed the guardianship transfer, the adoption decree, the capacity evaluation, and the conflict issue, he advised them to withdraw. Nina sent me the notice on a Wednesday afternoon. It was only 2 pages. After everything my mother had threatened, after all the words about blood and family and rights, the legal ending was almost boring. Martin and Lorraine Ellison withdrew all objections with prejudice. Each party would bear its own fees. No settlement, no confidentiality agreement, no apology. I printed the notice and placed it in Julian's old desk drawer, not as a trophy, as a receipt. In July, an email arrived from Lorraine with the subject line, "From your mother." I almost deleted it unread. Then I opened it, because curiosity is not the same as weakness. "Mara, I have been thinking a great deal. I know mistakes were made. I know you believe you were treated unfairly. I wish things had been different, but you were a very challenging child and we were under tremendous strain. I hope someday you will understand that parents are human too. I am not asking for money. I am asking for compassion. Your father is depressed. Heather is embarrassed. This has hurt everyone. Please call me. We need to heal as a family." There was no apology. Not one clear sentence naming what she had done. I forwarded it to Dr. Holt before our next session. "What do you hear?" she asked. "She regrets consequences." "Anything else?" "She still thinks my pain is an accusation against her." "What do you want to do?" I wrote back that night. "Lorraine, I read your message. I do not want contact with you or Martin. Do not call, email, visit my office, or approach me through other people. I wish you no harm, but I am not available for a relationship." She sent 3 more emails over the next month. I did not answer. Nina sent a formal no-contact letter after the 3rd. The email stopped. Heather was different. Her letter came in September, handwritten on notebook paper. No email, no dramatic subject line. Just an envelope with my name and a return address in Columbus. I waited 2 days before opening it. "Mara, I am not writing for money. I am not writing because Mom asked me to. She does not know I have your address. I am writing because I lied by being silent for too long. I remember the night you left. I watched from my bedroom window. I saw you sitting with your clothes. I heard Mom tell Dad not to turn on the porch light because it would make the neighbors ask questions. I knew it was wrong. I was 15, not 5. I could have come outside. I could have brought you a blanket. I could have said I was sorry. I did nothing. For years I let Mom say you abandoned us because that version made my life easier. I benefited from what they did to you. I got the attention, the lessons, the money, the softer rules. I told myself I was a kid too. But that is not the whole truth. I was old enough to know you were alone. I do not expect forgiveness. I am sorry anyway, Heather." I read it once. Then again. Then I put it in a drawer and did not touch it for a week. Heather had done what my mother could not do. She named the thing. She did not decorate it. She did not ask for anything. That did not make her safe. It made her honest for 1 page. Dr. Holt asked me what I wanted, not what I thought a good person should want. The answer took time. I did not want to become sisters overnight. I did not want holidays, family photos, or shared nostalgia built over a hole in the floor. But I also did not want to close the only door where someone had knocked without demanding payment. In November, I wrote back, "Heather, I read your letter. Thank you for telling the truth without asking me to comfort you. I am willing to have limited contact under clear conditions. You may not share information about me with Lorraine or Martin. You may not discuss Julian's estate, North Star, or money. You may not pressure me for forgiveness or closeness. If I end a conversation, you will respect it. If those terms work for you, we can start with one 20-minute video call each month, she replied 2 days later. I accept all of it. Our first call was awkward. She wore a plain gray sweatshirt and looked more tired than I remembered. She told me she had divorced 2 years earlier and was managing appointments at a physical therapy clinic. She had one son, Caleb, age 7. She did not call me his aunt. I appreciated that. I told her North Star was stable. I told her Minnesota winters were still offensive. I did not tell her about the panic attack I had before the call or the way my hands shook when her face appeared on the screen. At one point, Caleb shouted from another room, asking where his blue dinosaur cup was. Heather turned her head and answered him with a patience I had never heard in our house growing up. When she faced the camera again, she looked embarrassed. Sorry, it's fine. I try not to yell, she said quietly. Sometimes I hear Mom come out of my mouth and it scares me. I did not know what to say to that. Part of me wanted to comfort her. Part of me wanted to tell her that noticing was the bare minimum. Both parts were true. Noticing matters, I said finally. Changing matters more. She nodded. I know. At minute 19, I said, I need to stop. Okay, she said immediately. Thank you for talking to me. That immediate respect did more than any apology could have done. We kept talking once a month. Some calls lasted 10 minutes, some lasted 25. A few were canceled because I could not do it that day, and Heather never complained. By spring, I knew small things about her life. She liked gardening. She hated driving on highways. She had started therapy after the will reading because, in her words, I realized I had been living inside Mom's version of everything. We were not close. We were not strangers either. That middle place was enough. On May 23, 2026, 1 year after the will reading, I stood outside North Star's first warehouse in St. Paul. Julian had bought it in 1992 when the roof leaked, the loading doors stuck, and everyone told him the area was finished. He fixed it slowly, one tenant at a time, one honest lease at a time. We had renovated the building over the winter, new roof, efficient heating, safer lighting, and a training room for the scholarship students who would intern with us that summer. Beside the front entrance was a bronze plaque, Julian R. Ellison Building. For the man who chose responsibility and called it love, 1958 to 2025. I touched the raised letters of his name. Priya stood beside me with 2 coffees. He would complain that the plaque is too sentimental, she said. Then he would ask how much it cost. Then he would pretend not to cry. I laughed, and for once the laugh did not catch on anything sharp. North Star had grown by 9% since Julian's death. We had renewed our largest tenant, acquired a small distribution property in Eau Claire, and expanded our maintenance apprenticeship program. The Julian Ellison Young Inventors Fund had paid for 12 students to attend summer science programs, including one 13-year-old girl from Toledo who had built a low-cost flood alarm for basement apartments. When I read her application, I had to set it down and walk around my office. Her essay began, I want to go because I want to know what I can become when nobody is laughing at me. We funded her first. Lorraine and Martin had not contacted me since Nina's no-contact letter. I did not know whether they were angry, ashamed, or simply looking for someone else to blame. I no longer needed to know. Heather and I still spoke. Slowly, carefully, with rules. Sometimes healing looks less like a hug and more like a boundary that both people honor. People ask whether the inheritance made me feel safe. The truth is, money can protect choices, but it cannot raise a child retroactively. It cannot put a porch light on in 2009. It cannot make your mother come outside or your father speak or your sister open the window. What made me safe was Julian's steady love and the life I built after I believed him. For years, I thought being unwanted by my parents was a verdict. It was not. It was information about them, not me. That is the hardest thing for abandoned children to learn. The people who failed you may have been your whole world, but they were never the whole truth. Family can be blood. It can also be the person who drives through the night, the teacher who submits your application, the friend who sits beside you in a lawyer's office, the mentor who trusts you with the keys. The version of yourself who finally stops begging locked doors to open. I still have Julian's note from my first bedroom in St. Paul. No one gets to decide your future without you. He was right. My mother decided I was disposable. My father decided silence was easier. My sister decided for a long time that comfort mattered more than courage. Julian decided I was his daughter, and I decided the story would not end on the curb. If you have ever been told you were too difficult to love, I hope you hear me clearly. Sometimes the people who call you difficult are only angry that you stopped being easy to control. Sometimes the family that rejects you is not proof of your unworthiness. Sometimes it is the first locked door on the way to a life where you finally choose yourself.